change over, lean, watch out for the dog. Lean, 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 pin pedal, it opens right up. I have just set out a 5-kilometer course that I'm going to time myself on, and then once I've timed myself on that course, I'm going to see if I can improve, and I'm going to bring you along for everything that I've learned. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been learning and discovering unconventional descending tips that I really wish I'd known sooner, because applying these tips and techniques, you'll be able to descend with greater confidence, control, and speed. Before we dive into the video, if you don't know, this is part 3 of a 3-part series on descending, so if you haven't watched the other parts, I highly recommend you watch those first. Now, I'll share a few more tips and put everything together for the final run, and we'll start with 2 critical things to cover before getting on the bike. Not getting these right can really cost you confidence in yourself and your equipment. Let's begin by ensuring our bike is set up correctly for optimal performance and safety. And if we power through bike setup as fast as possible, we can get onto the really interesting stuff. Bike setup is really more of a safety check and tweaking the bike for personal preferences than straight up, you should do this advice. I'm following some recommendations that target the most impactful places where things can go wrong. Things like the handlebar and stem. Boring! I know it's not sexy, but it's critical. So check to make sure the bolts are tight and everything's aligned properly, and then the all-important brake check. Making sure brakes are in working order with pads okay, properly aligned, calipers, and preferred brake feel. And then comes tires and tire pressure. Really beyond this video, but there are 7 factors to consider. But I started with the tire manufacturer's recommendation and then fine-tuned the pressures. So personally, as I'm limited by my rim type, hookless, so no more than 60 PSI for me, and more pressure in the rear to account for the 8th consideration, weight distribution. You can measure weight distribution front to back using bathroom scales, but this really just means you can safely drop front tire pressure since it holds less weight. So I've ended up with my non-road tires with 50 PSI up front and 55 PSI in the rear. With our bike setup optimized, let's shift to the most underrated parts of descending: headspace. I've said it many times already, descending is a decision game. And to make the best decisions for speed and safety, you want to regulate your emotions and just remove them from the equation. Easy to say, hard to do, I agree. And on my first time run, I got caught up in chasing a motorbike down the hill, ignoring my initial intentions of riding safely within my comfort zone. So how am I preparing mentally now? Well, I've decided to use a mantra specifically for downhill. This has been done before with common mantras like smooth is fast and fast is smooth, but this is technique related. So my mantra is to aid concentration and regulating strong emotions like fear or anxiety, or even worse, emotions that amplify the ego. You've been doing this for years. You can go faster. Settle down, big boy. You're not racing. Plus, what if you crash? To keep both of these guys at bay, I've decided on the ride smooth, ride safe, keep your emotions in place. Moving on, we can now jump on the bike and put it all together. And I'm going to cover aero tucks and cornering technique. Let's imagine we have a wide open road, a straight line as far as the eye can see. What would you do in this type of situation? An aero tuck, of course. Something that if you get right, it's like free speed. And there's one position in particular that's been shown to be both safe and fast. Let me explain. Aero tucks are a controversial part of descending. They have changed over the years, as you can see here. What's cool for us is that these positions were studied by a team of researchers from the Netherlands and Belgium. And I'm curious if you can pick the top 3 fastest positions. I certainly got it wrong when I guessed, so why don't you give it a go? All right, how'd you go? Here are the top 3 positions ranked from fastest to slowest. Notice anything? The Froome dog position is missing. I was surprised by this. And for me, the fact that the Froome dog was slower then the back down position is encouraging because all top tube positions were banned in 2021 by the cycling governing body UCI. This may not greatly impact us non-professionals, but I'll be doing all I can to avoid these positions, and here's why. A different study found that the risks extend beyond control issues and hamper your ability to brake safely. Look at this. In a back down position, the low center of mass reduces the tendency of rear wheel lift during hard braking. This study also highlights that braking safety margins improve by changing positions from froom to seated and from seated to tucked, and tucked being the back down position. So both of these studies tell me that the back down position is the safest and fastest available to road cyclists. So that's what I've decided to use, and I'm referring to it as the nibbly position, and actually grew up riding this position, so feel pretty confident using it, except for one thing: hand position. In my younger days, I would hold the bars near the stem, which I'm a little reluctant to do now. But as you can see here, placing hands on the top of the bars offers an aerodynamic advantage over hands in the drops. It saves 5.4 seconds over a 5-kilometer distance compared to the bars and holding in the drops. So I've reconsidered this, and in long, wide open straights, I'll switch my hand position along with tucking in my elbows and legs. Then after a straight, let's imagine it's time to corner, which brings us to something that I'd never thought about in my 30+ years of riding. But I can honestly say that learning this has transformed my cornering. Without this, I'd have no clear way of finding my potential on descents. The big revelation? I've learned that everyone's eyes contain one flaw that can set us up for failure when descending. Human eyes cannot track scenery in motion. What does this mean? When you're looking at something that's moving quickly, your eyes can't keep up with all the details. You might have experienced this when you're looking at the view outside a car window. It's like trying to read a book while someone is flipping the pages really fast. Your eyes need a little bit of time to focus on what they're seeing, so when things are moving too quickly, everything just looks blurry. In a corner, this means you won't be able to separate parts of a corner and watch out for danger. But there is a little trick we can do to avoid blurry vision at higher speeds, and I'll reveal this in just a moment as it fits neatly into the sequence of actions required to negotiate a corner. The 5 steps to riding a successful and efficient corner are prepare, brake, adjust, turn, and maintain. To run through these steps, let's follow 2 pro cyclists taking a corner, Tom Pidcock and Nielsen Paulus, where we can observe one following these steps and the other one, well, not following the steps. We catch them on a short straight where they're both in an aero position, the UCI legal back down position, with their knees in and hands on the drops, and for Paulus, and on the hoods for Pidcock. Now, watch as they approach the corner. Hopefully they are judging the corner radius and camber from this early stage. I'm guessing they are because, as you can see, they're dropping their heads and keeping them vertical, even while they're in their aero tuck. This is all part of the first step. So as you approach the turn, you look through to the apex and you keep your head level and you start to prepare for the turn. Adjust your body, you point your inside shoulder and belly button towards the exit of the turn, and start shifting your weight down and forward, keeping both your elbows bent and hands in the front of the drops and fingers on the brake levers. Ideally, this is where you are picking braking, turn in, apex, and exit points, all at least the ones you can see. And this is where the trick for the eyes comes in. You focus your vision on each point as you approach it, going from one to the other, rather than trying to look at all of them at once. And you can see them both preparing for the corner, and they get out of the aero tuck and sit up, and they use their body for air braking. And this even looks like Lawless is using his legs as a sort of spoiler to slow down. It's somewhere here that the braking point starts, and it's at this point, from here to the turn-in point, you make your decision about braking. The 2 braking choices are scrub off as much as speed as you can in a straight line before you turn, or start braking but leave more braking to do by trail braking from the turn-in point to the apex. With braking, the general rules are you use your front brake for most of the braking power, always brake hard in a straight line, and as you enter the turn, you ease off the front brake but stay on the rear brake, and release the brakes as the lean angle increases during the turn. As we can see the difference, where I think Pidcock is trail braking because he's braking much later, while Paulus does most of his braking before the turn-in point, where he actually reduces the gap slightly by braking earlier, but you'll see why this is short-lived in a moment. Either way, Now is the time to adjust your body position, and they are both doing this by getting slightly lower, ready for the turn-in point, and Pidcock is just way more aggressive and lower than Powerless. This adjustment is in preparation for turning. Now Pidcock hits the turn-in point and then Powerless, and I'll play that again because I want to see if you notice anything specifically about how Pidcock turns into the corner. It's subtle, so let me play it again and then watch Powerless not do it. Any idea? It's something we haven't discussed in this series yet, and it's the one thing I wish I'd known sooner, because this is a real game changer for control around corners, but it's another misunderstood cornering technique brought over from motorcycling that's not modified enough for road cycling. Let me explain what I mean. When you turn into a corner and initiate your lean, the technique is called counter-steering. Counter-steering is a technique where you momentarily push the handlebar in the opposite direction of the turn to initiate the lean. Something you might already be doing without even knowing. It's talked about a lot in motorbike circles as the weight of a motorbike demands a counter movement to lean the bike over. The principle of counter steering is simple. To turn left, you move the bars to the right. The opposite goes for turning right, of course. And on the bike, I'm thinking about it in different ways because it's all driven by the relationship between your outside foot and your inside hand. And I figured out that if I can manage these two interface points on the bike, then everything else, like lean angle, steering, it kind of all just falls away. We can't see what the left hand is doing in both of these riders, but you can see Pidcock move right before he moves left. And to initiate this, the inside hand is weighted where pressure is applied forward into the front of the drop bar. And we can see the outside leg of both riders though. First we see Pidcock press his weight down on the outside pedal. He even gets it down by pedaling backwards to make sure it's done before the turn-in point. The outside foot is weighted as the leg goes down, and this action, combined with lifting the hips and the bum off the saddle just a little bit, results in additional pressure. Then here we see Powerless hit the turn-in point with pedals at 3 and 9 o'clock and slowly drop the leg as he moves through to the apex. By doing this, Powerless missed the opportunity to counter steer into the corner. A note on why unweighting the saddle and keeping the elbows and knees loose is important. This helps traction by taking some of the suspension demands off our tires and onto our bodies. And while I'm talking about suspension, road bikes obviously don't have any suspension, so it's done by the legs. Again, not by standing up, by just taking the weight off the pelvic bones is adequate enough. For rougher roads, enough clearance must be used so the saddle carries no weight at all, and this will help keep your vision from becoming even more blurred and keep a uniform load on the tires. By now, you are set in your position and you can't change until you hit the exit point, so it's all about maintaining speed and moving through the apex, and most importantly, trusting the technique. So they focus on where they want to go, not the obstacles. They keep their waists bent, distribute your weight evenly, keep elbows bent, your hands in the drops. And then finally, they look ahead to after the exit point and immediately look ahead to the next section and prepare for the next direction change. And Pidcock increased the gap here with less risk because Powerless doesn't look very confident or stable at this point, which looks a lot more sketchy. So in summary, when taking a corner at its limit, it will generally feel like you are bringing your weight slightly back, very low, and keeping pressure between the inside hand and the outside leg. If that last point is a little counterintuitive to you, I promise when you focus on weighting your inside hand in a hard corner, it's the biggest thing to contributing to that feeling of being on a rail, which is how you describe Pidcock, but definitely not Powerless. And that's cornering covered. It's time now to reveal how I did on my final run. Was it as fast as I wanted? Not really. Was it a bit sketchy? Yes, absolutely. Did I feel safe on the run? Actually, yes, I did. And did I beat my time of 13 seconds? Let's take a look and see. Actually, before I reveal it to you, I just want to hit you with one more thing, because once the ride is done, you've wasted your time if you don't try some of these tips and then observe and analyze yourself to get better. I have a series of questions that help evaluate any descent and give you ideas of where to improve. After going through these, you'll be able to pinpoint what to work on next. For example, if countersteering and leaning the bike was too easy, then a later turning point can be chosen, resulting in a later apex, allowing a corner to be passed at a greater speed with the same maximal bicycle lean angle. So now it's time to reveal the results. Coming up to the last few corners now. Go through the dry patch. Wide, wide, wide. Set up, set up, set up. Full braking. Let the brakes off. Run it round. Same again. Same again. Down to the last quarter. And we're home. And the answer is yes, I beat my time, and by a lot. The first time run was 8:09 and the final run was 6:49. 1 minute and 20 seconds faster. And more than anything, this really tells me that the test itself is more flawed than anything. I mean, I don't think it was the best run I've ever done. I do think I can go much faster. But this really helps me bring up some critical points about descending I haven't discussed yet. The fact that this is a public road with all of the obstacles, the dogs, the surface variations, and the overall uncertainty that comes with descending on everyday roads, you'll never get a clean run anywhere. Which leads me to my final point. This is a process. I am certainly not the world's best descender, but I'm getting better and I'm more confident with each run I do. So like a lot of things in cycling, no amount of theory will ever be as useful as just getting the reps in. I encourage you to practice these techniques in a safe environment and gradually build up your skills and confidence. If you want to see the entire run with commentary, then click here. If you found this series helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment with your own experiences or questions.